This player here to my right, according to Albert Breer, NFL Insider, has been a revelation. And Albert Breer, who works for Sports Illustrated and is always hopping on some of the more marquee radio shows across the country, is a great NFL insider. And he's talking here about Isaiah Rodgers. And I thought he shed some great insight on the Eagles' defensive side of the football here. So let's run through a couple of these quotes. I'll share the screen here. The Philadelphia Eagles' momentum of a year ago, Breer started off, when it felt like the organization was firing on all cylinders, feels like it has subsided. But there's a way for Philadelphia to get it back, and it's through the defense. And in particular, it's going to happen with the younger guys on what's long been an aging unit coming of age with new coordinator Vic Fangio aboard. Drilling down on that, the Eagles saw the most progress in that area at cornerback in the spring. Part of it has been the emergence of veteran additions, including Isaiah Rodgers. Still just 26, Rodgers started 10 games over 3 years with the Colts, then got suspended for 2023 for making over 100 bets. Yikes. Some on his own team. Indy released him in late June of last year, and Philly quietly added him 2 months later, stashing him on the reserve list for the rest of the year. He's been reinstated by the NFL just before the draft and has been a revelation over the past 2 months. We've talked about Isaiah Rodgers on this show. Performed well during OTAs. He was a winner during mandatory minicamp. And while he didn't play a ton in 2022, 283 coverage snaps, he did play really, really well in those 283 coverage snaps. So with more of a workload, can he maintain those numbers, and can he continue the momentum from performing well during OTAs and minicamp, and can he lock down a starting role opposite of Darius Slay at the cornerback spot? Overall Pro Football Focus grade in 2022 of 82.1. He could play the run. Good coverage grade. Passer rating allowed a 106.3. That's a little bit of a red flag there, but he held up very, very well. More from Albert Breer. Add to that the fact that top 40 picks Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, a safety corner combo in the mold of Malcolm Jenkins, have looked the part, and that young guys such as Keely Ringo have come along, and Philadelphia should be much better at the cornerback position. One sign of the improvement is that the Eagles are toying with moving aging corner James Bradberry to safety, a more suitable role for him on the roster, and something they wouldn't be doing if they didn't feel a lot better about the young talent they have at the position. And that talent at the cornerback spot, it's been one of the bigger storylines of this offseason. Philadelphia's pass defense in 2023, terrible. As Charles Barkley would say, man, it was terrible, that Eagles secondary, man. James Bradberry couldn't tackle anything. He was a traffic cone. But now, with the additions that Philadelphia's made at that cornerback spot and the emergence of some of these young players, I think that unit is going to be much better off, and could it be led in part by Isaiah Rodgers. Bleacher Report put together 32 players on 32 teams who could land extensions prior to the 2024 season. And as I also noted, Howie Roseman has been very, very busy in signing players to contract extensions this offseason. Landon Dickerson was given a bag, $21 million per year, highest paid guard in the history of the NFL as far as average annual value. Jordan Mailata, now making top 5 offensive tackle money in the National Football League. Devontae Smith, making $25 million per year. The contract tacked onto his 5th-year option. And then A.J. Brown, making $32 million per season, second most among all wide receivers in the NFL, behind Justin Jefferson at $35 million. So a Josh Sweat extension becomes very, very interesting here. He restructured his contract before the year. He has a cap hit of $8 million. In 2023, got off to a really good start. This is on the heels of that career year in 2022 when he had a career high 11 sacks. He had 6 sacks in the first 7 weeks of the year last year, and then he hit this crazy drought where he could not buy a sack, just like cold hitters cannot buy a hit. 1 sack in his final 9 starts. So is the future murky for him on top of the sliding in production? But then you think about what the Eagles did this offseason, right? Eagles paid Bryce Huff. He's making $17 million per season. They drafted Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian, and they're expecting Nolan Smith to take that sizable leap from year 1 to year 2. Added some weight, still has the speed, got the shoulder operated on. And is Josh Sweat a scheme fit for what Vic Fangio wants to do with this 3-4 front? I kind of think that Josh Sweat is more of that traditional 4-3 end, although Jonathan Gannon did run that hybrid defense. Here's what Bleacher Report had to say about Sweat. He remains a core piece in what is an overwhelmingly talented Eagles defensive front, while general manager Howie Roseman has made outside additions by adding Reddick via trade this spring, selecting Nolan Smith on day 1 in 2023 and taking a swing on toolsy edge rusher Jalix Hunt in the 3rd round in this year's draft. Sweat's ability to live up to expectations should see and allow him to earn a nice payday to remain an Eagle. Now, Josh Sweat's age is still on his side. He's still a relatively young player at 27 years old, even though he's been in the league for a little bit now, since being a 4th-round pick out of Florida State back in 2018. 6.5 sacks last year. Off the 11 that he had in 2022, as I always like to say, it's difficult to gauge which players were good, which players were bad last year because the scheme was so terrible. But the 11 sacks in 2022, a great year. And that really culminated in that career year after he was building up to that in the previous couple of seasons. And he's been a really good developmental story for the Birds. When he was growing up, in high school, he was the number 1 player in his recruiting class, and then he tore up his knee. He fell down the recruiting rankings. He went to Florida State and certainly didn't live up to the expectations of what was once the number 1 overall player in the class. Still a really good player, but the Eagles looked at him as a guy who had height at 265 pounds, good speed, good power, good pass rush moves. They take him in the 4th round with that injury history. And he's ended up being a good player and a good developmental story for Philadelphia. But have they started to plan for the post-Hassan Reddick era and the post-Josh Sweat era with some of the moves that they've made recently? Certainly interesting to talk about it in that way, because the Eagles were thinking about maybe releasing Josh Sweat. They restructure his contract to lower that number. He comes back to Philadelphia. Remember when he posted on Instagram? He thought that his days with Philadelphia were over, but now he's definitely going to be looking for a new deal after 2024. Will Josh Sweat land that aforementioned new deal with Philadelphia? Give me a Y for yes. Give me an N for no. Thanks to all of the new ones and the real ones who have hit that sub button recently. We're so glad to have you here on Eagles Now, and we won't let you down with our coverage.